Hello, everyone. My name is Ridvan Bari Urcosta. Today, together with my colleague Marek Budzisz, we are welcoming a very interesting guest, Pavel Luzin from Jamestown Foundation. He is a senior fellow at this analytical center. And Pavel Luzin, he's quite interesting writer, thinker regarding the Russian defense policy and regarding particularly currently when we're having Russo-Ukrainian war, his writings very important in order to understand what's going on in Russia. Welcome to the Strategy and Future, Pavel.
Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, depends on where you are right now. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Pavel. So my first question, it would be more like a general, more common, because recently in the West, it's one of the most popular issue. It is mobilization, and you are covering this topic quite often. How you would describe what's going on in Russia regarding mobilization and how successful it is? What kind of what is danger is coming from this process to the West, to Ukraine, and particularly I would say like for further escalation of this war.
And to be more precise, why Mr. Sobyanin and after him Putin decide to stop the mobilization in the middle of the process, as I understand the situation?
Your questions are complicated, so we have to divide them in several parts. First of all, the mobilization is an act of escalation itself. Because when you proclaim mobilization, so that means you try to escalate the situation. The purpose of this escalation is motivating the West, Kiev as well, for negotiations, for ceasefire agreement, for some peace talks maybe, but the main point here is giving Russia a kind of break within this war. I mean, a kind of giving Russia time. Giving Russia time to restore some of its military capacity. That's what the Kremlin wants. Secondly, the mobilization is aimed to restore some manpower, not in terms of quality of this manpower, but in terms of just quantity of this power. Because
Pavel, let me interrupt you. Because what is important, I think, to inform our viewers is they decided to rebuild the manpower for the defense or for the offense, because there are few points of view. Is it this defensive move or offensive?
First of all, it is a defensive move because they want to keep the currently occupied Ukrainian territories. They want to even not to stop, but to slow the Ukrainian counteroffense. That's the first thing of this mobilization. But the mobilization officially does not have any limits or any, I don't know, deadline. That means the mobilization may be a kind of endless process. And in future, for instance, next year or in a couple of years, depends on whether or not the Kremlin will be able to get some ceasefire agreement or not. In future, these mobilized people are aimed to be used in offensive operations, because the Kremlin does not give up its original strategic purpose of this war. And the strategic purpose of this war is a complete elimination of the Ukrainian statehood, of the Ukrainian culture, and of the Ukrainian nation. So that means currently the mobilization is aimed for defense, but future waves of mobilization will be aimed for offense. In case of Russia will be able to continue this war, in case of Ukraine will not be able to defeat Russia on the battlefield anytime soon.
Yes, but you know, comparing the manpower of Ukrainian forces with capacity to mobilize the additional forces in Russia, it will be extremely difficult, in our opinion, to receive the necessary numerical advantage on the Russia side to be able to make offensive steps, because at least you have 3-1. You should have the 3-1 advantage. That it's in practice for the foreseeable future, it's impossible just now. In my
exactly,
opinion.
You're totally right. But what's the calculations of Kremlin? Because Kremlin combines the mobilization with terror attacks against Ukrainian population. Kremlin believes that the global situation may change in coming several months. For instance, the elections in the U.S. Congress may change the situation. In the Kremlin's heads, they believe in this option. I don't know. The economic crisis in Europe may change the situation. Some military crisis on the Middle East or on the Pacific region may change the situation. So the Kremlin currently is very opportunistic. And of course, now they are not able to restore its manpower, even in quantity, in terms of quantity, just some compensation of losses of previous 8 months. But we don't know the rationality of the Kremlin, because when they started this war, they believed in completely irrational things. They believed that they will be able to defeat Ukraine in 3 days or in 5 days. That doesn't matter. They believe that their armed forces they are so strong and so powerful. And we also know that there are kind of disruption of communication channels within the Russian governance. I mean, when 3 years ago, the Russian, that time vice prime minister Yuri Borisov was forced to use RBC newspaper to send a message to the Kremlin about the about very poor statement of the Russian defense industry. That means that even the vice prime minister does not have a direct channel, communication channel with the Kremlin. So what is the information that the Kremlin has right now? We don't know this. We see the deep crisis of governance in Russia. Of course, objectively speaking, Russia will never be able to conduct a successful offensive operation against Ukraine, because Russia lost its best forces. Russia lost a lot of arms, a lot of other equipment, and Russia will not be able to reproduce this, and will not be able never, because the current sanctions make this restoration of military power just impossible. So the Russian defense industry will degrade more and more.
Pavel,
yes,
Pavel,
and
could you describe briefly the capabilities of Russian industrial sector working for the army? Because we've read your very interesting articles about published last few months in Insider and in other media about this limited capabilities, but nobody knows how much, for example, tanks and transporters the industry in Russia yearly is able to produce. The same story with turrets, the same story with ammunition depots, engines for tanks and for airplanes. So could you briefly describe this or show us the picture how capable is Russian industrial sector?
So the Russian defense industry is not too much capable, because in previous already 12 years, from 2009 2010, it was the highest capacity of the Russian defense sector the last 10-12 years, before the large-scale attack against Ukraine. I mean, before February 24. And in terms of combat helicopters, for instance, only 25 to 30 units annually. The Russian factories were able to produce, even with using Ukrainian helicopter engines. In terms of combat aircrafts, Russia was able to produce average amount of 30-35 units annually. Combat aircrafts, I mean Su-30, SM, SM-2, and other modifications. Su-34, Su-35. From 30 to 35 units annually. Of course, Russia has a significant storage of Su-24 and Su-25 combat aircraft. But in my opinion, this war is the last war for these types of aircraft, because after this war, those planes which will survive, they will need repairment, and the repairment currently does not have any sense for these types of aircraft. In terms of tanks and armored vehicles, it's not so easy to count, but what I saw in previous several years, no more than 150, 160 modernized battle tanks annually. I mean T-72 and T-80 types, and no more than 10 to 12 new tanks, I mean T-90. They are not new in terms of development, but they are new in terms of manufacturing. I mean, T-72, T-80, these tanks were produced in 1970s, 1980s, and now they're modernized. And towards armored vehicles, so no more than 400 newly manufactured and modernized armored vehicles annually.
Pavel?
So
Pavel?
modernized, yes, modernized armored vehicles means that they were taken from either military units or storage bases and were modernized on the factory. They were added with, I don't know, communication system and so on, new engine.
Pavel, I think it's the most important for Ukrainians, particularly the question regarding the missiles. So the rockets, the caliber and kinzhals. So I remember very good how the political commentators, military experts already in March and April were saying that Russia exhausted own capability to build or produce the missiles like caliber or kinzhal. So what about how you would comment this? Because Russia is still attacking and using calibers. Kinzhals are still very operative element of Russian, let's say, air warfare in Ukraine.
I'm not sure about kinzhal because there were no too many evidences of using this type of missile, and we didn't see the remaining parts of this missiles. I mean, for me, kinzhal missile remains to be something mythical weapon because it appeared in 2018. It appeared from nowhere. There was no, I don't know, R&D program. There was no significant supply chains, and so on and so on. So for me, kinzhal still is either using of Ha-22 or Ha-32 missile, not on Tu-22 M3 bomber, but on MiG-31 fighter, because there are huge technical problems with Tu-22 M3 bombers with their engines, I mean. Or okay, some experts say that it is an Iskander missile just using from the fighter, not from the ground. I'm not sure that the ground-based ballistic missile may be easily used on fighter, because the different physics of flight, and I don't know. Maybe it's a kind of reproducing of 1960s experience, when, for instance, the Americans have a Skybolt program, where they developed aeroballistic missile, but the range of that missile was not so huge, just a couple of hundreds of miles. So it's 300, 400 kilometers. And there is no much sense.
But how about caliber?
Of using it? Caliber, yes. Caliber definitely exists in several types of this missile. I mean, sea-based missiles, ground-based missiles, 9M729, and air-based missile Ha-101. It is also a caliber type missile. Okay, and also Russia uses anti-ship missile Onyx or P-800. It's a supersonic ramjet missile, anti-ship missile that is used against ground targets in Ukraine. So the Russian manufacturing capacity is limited here because each type of caliber missile Russia is able to produce in amount of 50, no more than 50 missiles annually.
Per month?
Towards Iskander per year, annually, every year, not in months. In months, it's impossible to produce such amount every year. Iskander ballistic missile can be produced in amount also no more than 50 missiles annually. Sometimes, some years, it looked like the amount was limited by 30 to 40 units, but let it be 50, no more than 50 units annually. And towards Ha-32 or KH-32 missile, it's a replacement of KH-22 missile. The amount is no more than 20 units every year, no more than 20. It's a very sophisticated missile, liquid fueled missile, and sophisticated engine, and so on and so on. So the total amount, and Onyx, of course, Onyx, no more than 55 missiles annually. So we may say that the total amount of the missiles that Russia can produce every year is no more than 225 missiles, 225. Because towards caliber missiles, there are different types, but there are just two types of engines for this missiles. One engine gives an opportunity to give a range of up to 2,500 kilometers. So this engine is used on KH-101 missile, and on caliber NK missile, it's a sea-based long-range cruise missile. Firstly used in 2015 in Syria. And the second engine gives a range up to 1,000 kilometers. And it is used on normal typical sea-based caliber missile and on ground-based caliber missile, I mean 9M729 cruise missile, or Iskander K system. So, 50 units of caliber long range missiles, 50 units of caliber up to 1,000 kilometers missile with a range of 1,000 kilometers, 55 units of Onyx supersonic anti-ship missiles, up to 50 units of Iskander ballistic missiles, and up to 20 units of KH-32 missile. So that's all. only these missiles give Russia an opportunity to strike on a range more than 300 kilometers. Of course, Russia also has shorter range missiles. I mean, KH-59 and KH-35. Towards these types of missiles, I cannot estimate the manufacturing capacity. But at the same time, this capacity cannot be huge. It cannot be, hundreds of missiles every year. It cannot be this. So Russia is losing its missile capacity. Of course, the Russian storage of KH-555. It's a Soviet era cruise missile, air-based. It's a predecessor of KH-101. These missiles were manufactured in Kharkiv, in Ukraine, in 1980s. So they are not manufactured anymore. And Russia fired the most of them, or almost all of them. Russia also fired a significant amount of KH-22 missiles, and they are very sensitive. These missiles are very sensitive to storage conditions. And even if Russia still has some amount of them, the most of these missiles cannot be used. Just several of them may be used because of sensitivity for storage conditions and because of liquid fuel and so on and so on. So the Russian storages of missiles that Russia produced in previous 10, 12 years, and towards Iskander ballistic missiles, Russia produced them in previous 15 years. The most of the storage is exhausted right now. Russia still has a capacity to produce these missiles, still has a capacity because of storage of components, storage of electronics, and so on and so on. But I presume that this year, Russia will be able to keep the annual manufacturing capacity, and maybe next year Russia still will be able to keep the manufacturing capacity. But after 2023, I am sure that the number of manufactured missiles will decline, and will decline significantly year by year.
So you say
at the end.
But the capacity at the level of 250 more or less items yearly.
225.
No, yeah, 250.
Yeah. Oh,
but let me ask one more question, because more or less the same picture is with traditional artillery munition. A few months ago, I've read your article where you predicted that before the end of the year, the Russians will have tremendous problems with munitions, and then even will be the rationing of consumption. And if we compare the intensity of fire in May or in June with today's situation, that the intensity is much lower. Is it this phase of the war you predicted that they will exhaust their traditional artillery munition capacities?
It seems so. They used a lot of artillery munitions. And they also used the most of its guns, I mean artillery guns, because they also have their lifetime. So each, for instance, howitzer can fire just 2,000, maybe 3,000 artillery munitions before being replaced.
3,000 is optimistic, but, I think.
It's optimistic and conservative. Because it depends on whether or not soldiers use a special chemistry that prolong the lifetime of gun. I presume they do not use this special chemistry, so they just fire the munitions without any caring about gun. But at the end, okay, Russia, the Russian factories were able to produce and modernize up to 1,700,000 artillery munitions every year. And they started to do this in 2010s. Before 2010s, in 1990s and early 2000s, Russia did not produce significant amounts of artillery munitions. So Russia used the Soviet era munitions. But after 30 years, the Soviet storages of artillery cannot be used in a proper way, because artillery munitions also has their lifetime, even if they are in storage. Even if they are in, yes.
Yes, finish. I will ask.
Yeah. Even if they are in a good storage conditions. But the Russian artillery munition is not in a good storage condition, because Russian artillery arsenals, they are old-fashioned enough. So 1,700,000 of artillery munitions every year. And I mean all types of artillery munitions, from a small munition to main calibers. So Russia used the most of them already. And can this munition will be can this munition be replaced? I'm not sure, because currently Russia spent up to 10 years of its manufacturing. I mean, used munitions on the battlefield. And that's a problem, because the Russian gunpowder factories, like Perm, like Kazan, and so on, they are dependent on the imported industrial equipment.
From Austria.
They cannot, they cannot use Russian-made equipment, because there is no Russian-made equipment at all. The same, meanwhile, the same towards the missiles, because all the factories that produce rocket fuel in Russia, especially solid rocket fuel, they are dependent on the imported industrial equipment. Imported from Europe, especially from Germany, imported from other countries like the United States, like Japan, and so on. So Russia is not able to replace the artillery munitions arsenal. Of course, Russia still has some amount of this, and in case of lower intensity of conflict, Russia will be able to use artillery for a while. But also the problem is with guns themselves. I mean, howitzers, tank guns, and so on and so on. Because okay, you exhausted the lifetime of your guns, but who will replace them? The only factory in Russia which is able to produce guns, I mean artillery guns, is Motoviliha plant in Perm. And Motoviliha plant, firstly, it feels very bad in economic terms. Several years ago, it moved through bankruptcy. And the efficiency of this factory is very low. But also, this factory is completely dependent on the Austrian-made industrial equipment. Austrian-made, Motoviliha ordered the industrial equipment in Austria in 2011, and next years after 2011, Motoviliha got this industrial equipment, and now it's impossible to replace or to modernize these facilities. So Russia will lose its artillery as well. Of course, there are some amount of howitzers and other types of artillery in storage, manufactured in Soviet times, 1970s, 1980s, 1950s even. But we'll see whether or not it's possible to use Z guns and to replace the current artillery. So in every field of arms, I mean helicopters, planes, tanks, artillery, missiles, we see the same picture. We see that Russia used more than half, at least more than half of every type of arms. Sometimes it uses the amount that is equal of 10 years of manufacturing. Sometimes it uses the amount that is equal of 12 years of manufacturing. But whether or not Russia has a next 10 or 12 years of manufacturing, I'm not sure. I'm not sure because the current sanctions, it's embargo. De facto, it is embargo on supply of equipment, technologies, components in Russia. So the Russian industrial base, the Russian defense industry, just does not have another 10 years. It will die by 2030. It will not completely die. It will survive in some parts, but it will not be industry. It will not be industrial complex. It will be a kind of, you know, some number of factories which will produce something that they will be able to produce.
Pavel,
and Russia will never be able to replace its military power.
From the current war perspective, how long Russia would able to maintain itself from the technological point of view? Because you outlined it some like perspectives, even you said even till the end of the 2023, in some certain areas Russia is able to maintain technologically itself. But
my estimations, they are conservative enough. I try not to overestimate.
Okay, in current shape, how Russia is doing right now? How long it can maintain itself in current shape?
In current shape, I think that okay, after 2023, it will be hard to maintain the manufacturing of missiles. I'm not sure about tanks. I presume that battle tanks Russia is not able to produce. Russia is able just to modernize battle tanks. but without imported components, Russia is not able to modernize them as well. Or it will be just, you know, modernization on paper. We may already see the contract for modernization of 800 T-62 battle tanks. Russia replaced them more than 10 years ago, and Russia denied from them more than 10 years ago, after the war in Georgia. It's a tank from 1950s, and how to modernize these tanks. Okay, maybe it is possible to provide some modernization of these tanks, but the Russian industrial capacity does not allow Russia to modernize them in a proper way.
Yeah.
Just factories are not able to do this. Okay, Russia will try to modernize something in the next 1 or 2 years. Russia will be able to produce some artillery munitions in next, I don't know, 2 or 3 years.
Yes,
but yes, but it depends on the level of intensity of conflict. If Russia will be able to decrease the level of intensity through ceasefire agreement or something like that, Russia will improve its statement. If Ukraine, together with the West, will not give Russia this break, will not give Russia this time, and will continue its combat pressure on Russia, Russia will collapse in coming.
Yes, Pavel, let me
months.
ask, because that's a great moment to ask the subsequent question. If they have no prospect to reach the numerical advantage in manpower, as we described the picture, if they have no prospect to reach the advantage in equipment, or even they will have tremendous problems with munition and almost everything, on what they count on? I mean the Kremlin, because in this situation, the last tool they can use is nuclear escalation. If we want to win the war, or to win the peace, just mean to stop the war on our conditions, because time is not working on the Russian side.
Yes, the Kremlin the Kremlin believes in several things. The first thing, the Kremlin believes that the West will not be able to support Ukraine for a long-term prospect. The second thing, the Kremlin believes that there will be a kind of crisis, social crisis, economic crisis, political crisis in Ukraine because of Kremlin's terror, because of ongoing war. Kremlin believes that Ukrainians tired from the war, and so on and so on. The third thing, the Kremlin believes that there will be a new military crisis in the world in foreseeable future, maybe in 2023. Doesn't matter whether or not it will be Iran, or it will be China with Taiwan, or it will be both, or something like that. And fourth thing, the Kremlin believes that it will be able to restore its military power. That it needs just a break, I don't know, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, that the Kremlin will be able to mobilize the Russian economy, to isolate the Russian society from the world in a proper way, and to restore the economy, because they don't know history. They don't know that the Soviet Union won the Second World War just because of Lend-Lease, just because of industrial supplies from the United States. They presume, currently the Russian authorities presume that everything is possible, that with support of Iran, China, North Korea, Belarus, with the motivation of the Russian people, the Kremlin will be able to restore its military power. But, you know, it's a kind of magical thinking. But it's a part of the Kremlin's rationality.
Does it mean that you don't believe in the nuclear escalation?
Oh, of course. Escalation is also an option. In case of the Kremlin will not be able to get a break within this war, it may use a nuclear weapon. And currently, in my opinion, the current probability of using nuclear weapon is higher than it was on spring. But at the same time, we should not overestimate. Not overestimate the threat. Okay, even if Russia will use nuclear weapons, the world will survive. Ukraine will survive. The West will survive. NATO will survive. But Russia will lose. I don't know. Will lose all its reputation. No one in this world will support Russia. But everyone in this world will hate Russia, and will do anything to stop Russia. Even China, even I don't know, North Korea possibly, because there is no choice. The West and Ukraine, of course, Ukraine and together with the West, they can stop Russia only on the battlefield. It's impossible to do this in another way, because if Russia will get this break, will get time to restore some power, Russia also will spend this time, will use this time to destroy the global order. Russia definitely will become a major proliferator of missile technologies, of nuclear technologies, to Iran, to North Korea, to Turkey, for instance. Why not? Because Turkey, despite the fact that Turkey is a NATO member, despite the fact that Turkey supplies Bayraktars to Ukraine and so on, the specifics of the Turkish political regime right now may give an unexpected results, may give unexpected outcomes. So Russia may become a major proliferator of nuclear and missile technologies. So how to avoid this? Just to stop Russia on the battlefield. Because in case of major defeat in Ukraine, Russia will face significant domestic political turbulence. And this political turbulence may give a kind of, may give reconciliation of the conflict.
Pavel, we have to finish because some other Zooms are waiting for us. And
super.
Again, thank you very much. And I see real potential that we need to meet again. And if you would agree and with our proposal, we would happy to speak once again with you regarding these topics. And again, thank you very much.
Dziękuję bardzo za zaproszenie i do zobaczenia w takim razie.
Dziękuję.
Dziękuję.